The sound of a child's wail echoed through the night, but when Abigail Reed awoke with a start, her arms reaching instinctively for the cradle beside her bed, her hands met only empty air. No baby slept there hadn't for weeks now, yet her dreams kept bringing her back to that terrible night when fever had taken her infant daughter from this world. Wyoming Territory, 1872, was unforgiving in more ways than one. Abigail wiped sweat from her brow and pulled her knees to her chest, her nightgown damp with perspiration despite the cool spring air coming through the open window. Her small cabin felt suffocating, the walls too close, the emptiness too loud. 6 months a widow, 2 weeks a childless mother, Abigail wondered how much more loss one heart could bear before it simply gave up beating altogether. Morning light crept through her window, illuminating the empty spot where the cradle had stood before she'd asked the neighbor boy to take it away. She couldn't bear to see it empty day after day, but now the absence was its own presence, mocking her with possibilities that would never come to pass. A knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. Abigail quickly wiped her eyes and reached for her robe. "Just a moment," she called, voice hoarse from crying. She splashed water on her face from the basin and pinched her cheeks for color. When she opened the door, Abigail was surprised to find Mitchell Vaughn standing on her porch, hat in hand. She knew him only in passing, a quiet cowboy who worked for the Richardson Ranch a few miles away. His dark hair was a bit too long, curling at the edges beneath his hat, and his face was tanned from days spent in the saddle. "Mrs. Reed," he said with a polite nod. "I hope I'm not disturbing you." "Not at all, Mr. Vaughn," she replied, though she made no move to invite him inside. A woman living alone had to be careful, even with men who seemed respectable. "What brings you here?" Mitchell shifted his weight, eyes darting briefly to the space behind her before returning to her face. "Mr. Richardson sent me. He heard about your loss. We all did. He wanted to offer some help with your land, seeing as how you're on your own now." Abigail stiffened. Of course, they thought she'd sell now. Her 20 acres adjoined the Richardson property, and old man Richardson had been trying to buy it since before her husband Thomas had passed. "Please tell Mr. Richardson I'm managing just fine," she said, her voice cooler than before. Mitchell nodded but made no move to leave. "That's not why I'm here, madam. I mean, it's why he sent me, but he trailed off, seeming embarrassed. "I heard you lost your little one. My sister lost her baby last winter. I know there's nothing to say that helps, but I thought maybe. Well, I brought something." He gestured toward a wagon parked a short distance away. In the back was something covered with a blanket. Curiosity got the better of her. Abigail pulled her robe tighter and stepped out onto the porch. "What is it? May I show you?" he asked. When she nodded, Mitchell walked to the wagon and carefully removed the blanket. Underneath was a beautifully crafted rocking chair, the wood polished to a rich glow in the morning light. "I made it," he said, his voice quiet. "For my sister after. It helped her to have something to hold onto while she grieved. I thought maybe you might want one too." Abigail felt tears well in her eyes again, but these were different somehow. The simple kindness of this near stranger was almost too much to bear. "That's very thoughtful," she managed to say. "But I couldn't accept such a gift." "It's not charity, Mrs. Reed," Mitchell said firmly. "Just one human being trying to ease another's pain a little. Would you allow me to bring it inside for you? You don't have to use it if you don't want to." Abigail hesitated, then nodded. Mitchell lifted the rocking chair with ease, carrying it up the porch steps and into her small cabin when she opened the door wider. He placed it beside her bed, exactly where the cradle had been. The symbolism wasn't lost on her. A place to rock, to grieve, to remember, but not a cruel reminder of what she had lost. "Thank you," she whispered. Mitchell nodded. "I'll be going now, but Mrs. Reed?" "Yes. If you need anything at all, the Richardson Ranch is just over the ridge. Ask for me." After he left, Abigail stood staring at the rocking chair for a long while before finally sitting down. The gentle motion was soothing, and for the first time since her baby had died, she cried without feeling like she might shatter completely. The next day, Abigail was in her small garden when she spotted a rider approaching. She recognized Mitchell's broad shoulders and the way he sat his horse even before she could make out his face. He dismounted a respectful distance away and approached on foot, leading his horse. "Mrs. "Reed," he called, "I hope I'm not intruding." "Mr. Vaughn," she acknowledged, brushing dirt from her hands. "Twice in 2 days, people will talk." The hint of humor surprised even her, and Mitchell's smile was quick and warm. "I just wanted to make sure you were all right, and—" He pulled a small package from his saddlebag. "My mother sent these seeds, said they're for summer squash that grows well in this soil." Abigail accepted the package, touched by the gesture. "Please thank your mother for me," Mitchell nodded, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. "How are you finding the chair? It's beautiful craftsmanship," she said honestly. "You're quite skilled." "My father was a carpenter before he tried his hand at ranching, taught me everything he knew." He paused. "Mrs. Reed, I was wondering if you might let me help with some repairs around your place. I noticed your fence is down in the north corner, and that roof could use some attention before the summer storms." Abigail's pride warred with practicality. The farm had been falling into disrepair even before Thomas died. With the baby coming, they'd focused on just keeping things running, planning to make improvements later. Then Thomas had been thrown from his horse, and later there had been no reason to care about fences or roofs. "I can't pay you, Mr. Vaughn," she said finally. "I'm not asking for payment, just maybe a meal now and then." His eyes were kind, with no trace of pity. Nobody should have to do everything alone, and so it began. Mitchell would come by 2 or 3 times a week, always in the late afternoon after his work at the Richardson Ranch was done. He mended fences, patched the roof, fixed the broken step on her porch, and a dozen other small tasks that Abigail had been trying to ignore. At first, she kept her distance, watching him work from inside the house or while tending to her own chores. But as the weeks passed, she found herself looking forward to his visits. She would prepare simple meals, stews, cornbread, apple pies when she had fruit, and they would eat together on the porch if the weather was fair. They talked little at first, but gradually, Abigail learned about Mitchell's family, how his father had moved them from Pennsylvania to Wyoming when Mitchell was just 10 years old, hoping to build a better life. How his mother had taught school before her marriage and made sure all her children could read and write well. How his sister had married a shopkeeper in Cheyenne and lost her baby to the same fever that had taken Abigail's daughter. In turn, she shared small pieces of herself. How she'd come west as a bride at 19, full of hope and fear in equal measure. How she and Thomas had worked the land together, dreaming of the day it would be prosperous enough to pass on to their children. One evening in late June, as they sat on the porch watching fireflies appear in the gathering dusk, Mitchell asked about the baby. "What was her name?" Abigail's breath caught, but the pain was duller now, no longer the sharp, stabbing grief of those first weeks. "Elizabeth," she said softly. "We called her Beth," Mitchell nodded. "That's a fine name." She had the tiniest fingers, Abigail continued, surprising herself with the desire to speak about her daughter. "Perfect little fingernails. I used to count them over and over, making sure they were all there." Mitchell smiled. "My sister did the same with her son, said she couldn't believe something so small could be so complete." "Yes," Abigail whispered. "Exactly that." They sat in companionable silence until the stars emerged fully, and when Mitchell finally stood to leave, Abigail found herself wishing he could stay longer. July brought scorching heat and the threat of drought. The creek that ran through Abigail's property slowed to a trickle, and she worried for her garden and the few cattle she had managed to keep after Thomas died. Mitchell helped her dig a deeper watering hole for the animals and rigged a simple irrigation system for the garden using wooden troughs and the slope of the land. "You're ingenious, Mr. Vaughn," she told him as water flowed from the creek to her tomato plants. "Mitchell," he corrected gently. "After all this time, don't you think you could call me Mitchell?" Abigail felt a flush creep up her neck that had nothing to do with the heat. "Mitchell," she agreed, "and you should call me Abigail." His smile was like the sun breaking through clouds. "Abigail," he repeated, as if tasting the name. That night, sitting in the rocking chair he had made her, Abigail acknowledged the feelings she had been trying to ignore. She was falling in love with Mitchell Vaughn. The realization terrified her. She had already lost so much. How could she risk her heart again? The next time Mitchell came by, Abigail was distant, making excuses about chores needing attention. She could see the hurt and confusion in his eyes, but she couldn't explain. Not yet. Perhaps not ever. For 2 weeks, she avoided being alone with him, always finding reasons to cut their conversations short. But the day he didn't come at all was worse than any awkwardness. Abigail found herself watching the trail from her window, hoping to see his familiar figure on horseback. When 3 days passed without a visit, Abigail made up her mind. She would go to the Richardson ranch just to make sure Mitchell was all right. She told herself it was merely neighborly concern. She wore her best dress, a faded blue cotton that had once been quite pretty, and plaited her hair carefully. The mirror showed a woman she hardly recognized anymore. At 23, grief had etched fine lines around her eyes, but there was color in her cheeks again, and her hazel eyes held something like hope. Abigail hitched her wagon and drove the 5 miles to the Richardson ranch, rehearsing what she would say. But when she arrived, it was to find the place in an uproar. A group of cowboys were mounting up in the yard, faces grim and rifles in their scabbards. Old man Richardson himself approached her wagon. "Mrs. Reed," he said, tipping his hat, "this isn't a good time for a social call." "I was looking for Mr. Vaughn," she said, anxiety tightening her chest. "Is he here?" Richardson's face darkened. "Mitch rode out to check the north pasture yesterday morning. Horse came back without him a few hours ago. We're just heading out to look." Abigail's hands tightened on the reins. "I'm coming with you." "No place for a woman," Richardson began, but Abigail cut him off. "I know every inch of the land between here and my place. If he's hurt out there, an extra pair of eyes won't hurt your search." Richardson studied her for a moment, then nodded curtly. "Stay with the group." No wandering off. The search party spread out across the rolling hills of the Richardson property. Abigail rode with a young cowboy named Jimmy who seemed uncomfortable with her presence, but was too polite to say so. As they neared the boundary with her own land, Abigail felt a prickling sense that they were going in the wrong direction. "Wait," she said suddenly, "the old mine shaft, it's just over that rise, about a 1/4 mile into my property." "What mine shaft?" Jimmy asked. "It's from before the war. Some prospector thought he'd found silver, but it played out. Thomas and I boarded it up when we first moved in, but the timber might have rotted by now." Jimmy looked dubious, but followed as Abigail urged her horse toward the rise. The entrance to the mine was half hidden by brush, but as they approached, Abigail could see that the boards covering it had indeed been broken. Fresh horse tracks led to the entrance. "Mitchell," she called, dismounting quickly. "Mitchell, are you in there?" A faint call answered her, and Abigail's heart leapt. "He's here," she shouted to Jimmy, who was already wheeling his horse around to alert the others. "Careful, madam," he warned. That ground could be unstable, but Abigail was already at the entrance, peering into the darkness. "Mitchell." "Can you hear me, Abigail?" His voice was weak but clear. "Stay back, the shaft collapsed when I came in. It's not safe." "What happened? Are you hurt?" "I was tracking a stray calf," he explained, his voice echoing strangely. "Followed it onto your land. I saw the mine and remembered you mentioning it once. Thought the calf might have wandered in. The entrance gave way as soon as I stepped inside." "Are you injured?" Abigail repeated, fear making her voice sharp. "My legs trapped under some rocks." "Nothing broken, I don't think, but I can't get free." By then, the rest of the search party had arrived. Richardson took charge immediately, sending 2 men back to the ranch for ropes and lanterns while the others began clearing the debris from the entrance. "We'll have you out soon, Mitch," Richardson called into the darkness. The rescue took hours. The men worked carefully, wary of causing another collapse. Abigail stayed as close as they would allow her, passing water to the workers and calling encouragement to Mitchell. When they finally reached him, Mitchell was pale from pain and thirst, but his eyes lit up when he saw Abigail peering anxiously over the shoulder of one of his rescuers. "You found me," he said simply. "You scared me half to death," she replied, fighting back tears of relief. They brought him back to Abigail's cabin, as it was closer than the Richardson ranch, and his injuries, while painful, weren't severe enough to require a doctor's immediate attention. Richardson promised to send for the doctor from town the next day, and left 2 of his men to help Abigail tend to Mitchell for the night. After the others had gone and the two cowboys were settled in her small parlor, Abigail finally had a moment alone with Mitchell in her bedroom, where they had placed him on her bed. "Why did you come looking for me?" he asked, his voice hoarse with exhaustion. Abigail dampened a cloth and wiped the dirt from his face gently. "You didn't come by for 3 days. I was worried. You've been avoiding me," he said, no accusation in his tone, just a statement of fact. "I know, I'm sorry." She busied herself with arranging the pillows behind him. Mitchell caught her hand. "Abigail, look at me." She met his gaze reluctantly. "I need to tell you something," he said. "Being trapped in that mine, not knowing if anyone would find me, it makes a man think about what's important." Abigail's heart hammered in her chest. "Mitchell, no, let me finish. I love you, Abigail Reed. I think I started falling in love with you the first time I saw you sitting in that rocking chair, allowing yourself to grieve. You're the strongest, most beautiful woman I've ever known." Tears spilled down Abigail's cheeks. "I've been so afraid," she whispered. "Afraid to care about anyone again, afraid to lose someone else." "I know," he said softly, "but that's no way to live. Trust me, I've had plenty of time to think about it these last 24 hours. Abigail laughed despite her tears. "You're impossible." "That's not a no," Mitchell pointed out, a glimmer of his usual humor returning. "No," she agreed. "It's not a no." The weeks that followed were a time of healing for Mitchell's injured leg and for Abigail's wounded heart. Mitchell stayed at her cabin while he recovered, sleeping on a pallet in the parlor once he was able to move from her bed. Richardson arranged for another hand to cover Mitchell's duties, seeming unsurprised and even pleased by the developing relationship between his employee and the widow Reed. By August, Mitchell was walking with just a slight limp, and he and Abigail had settled into a comfortable routine. They worked her land together during the day, Mitchell teaching her about cattle ranching, Abigail sharing her knowledge of gardens and preserving food. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch, talking about everything and nothing, occasionally reading aloud from one of the few books Abigail owned. One evening, as the first hint of autumn crispness touched the air, Mitchell took Abigail's hand as they sat watching the sunset. "I've been thinking," he said. "A dangerous pastime," she teased. He smiled. "I'm serious. I've been saving my wages for years, thinking someday I'd have enough to buy my own place. I've got a fair amount set aside now." Abigail's heart sank. Was he planning to leave? She tried to keep her voice steady. "That's wonderful. You'd make a fine rancher on your own." "I'm not explaining this well," Mitchell said, running a hand through his hair in frustration. "What I'm trying to say is, I love you, Abigail. I want to marry you if you'll have me. We could combine my savings with your land, build something together." Abigail stared at him, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. "Are you proposing to me, Mitchell Vaughn?" He knelt before her, still holding her hand. "I am." "I know it might seem too soon, and if you need more time, I understand. But I know my own heart, and it belongs to you completely." Abigail thought of all she had lost: her home in the East, her husband, her baby girl. She thought of the empty cradle and the rocking chair that had replaced it. She thought of how Mitchell had come into her life when she was at her lowest point and had, with quiet persistence and gentle kindness, shown her that life could still hold joy. "Yes," she said, her voice clear and certain. "Yes, I will marry you." Mitchell's face broke into a radiant smile, and he rose to pull her into his arms. Their first kiss was gentle, almost hesitant, but filled with promise. They were married 2 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the small church in town. Richardson gave Mitchell time off for a brief honeymoon, and they spent a blissful week exploring the mountains to the west, camping under the stars and talking about their future. When they returned to the cabin, their home now, Mitchell carried Abigail over the threshold, both of them laughing at the old tradition. That night, as they lay together in the quiet darkness, Mitchell traced the curve of Abigail's cheek with his fingertip. "Are you happy?" he asked. "Happier than I ever thought I could be again," she answered truthfully. "I was thinking," he said, "that maybe we could turn the small room into a workshop. I could make furniture to sell in town, might bring in some extra money while we build up the ranch." Abigail was quiet for a moment. "I had thought that room would be a nursery someday," she admitted, "if we were blessed with children." Mitchell propped himself up on one elbow, studying her face in the moonlight streaming through the window. Do you want children, Abigail? I wasn't sure if, after Beth. I do, she said softly. I'm scared, of course, but yes, I want a family with you. His kiss was tender, a promise and a prayer all at once. Then that room stays empty for now, until we need it. As summer turned to fall and then to winter, Abigail and Mitchell worked side by side to improve their ranch. Mitchell's carpentry skills were in demand in town, and he began making furniture that Abigail would finish with paint or varnish. They used the money to buy more cattle and repair the barn, planning for the future one day at a time. Christmas came, their first as husband and wife, and Mitchell surprised Abigail with a gift that brought tears to her eyes, a small wooden box with Beth's name carved into the lid. For her things, he explained as Abigail ran her fingers over the delicate lettering. Her memory should always have a place in our home. Abigail placed the tiny gown Beth had worn and a lock of her hair inside the box, along with the bootie she had been knitting when the fever came. She set it on the mantel, where she could see it each day not as a reminder of loss, but as an acknowledgement of love that transcended death. Spring arrived with its promise of renewal, and with it came news that filled their home with joy. Abigail was expecting a baby in the fall. The fear was there, of course, but it was overshadowed by hope and the knowledge that whatever came, they would face it together. One evening in early summer, Abigail sat in the rocking chair that had been Mitchell's first gift to her, her hands resting on the small swell of her belly. Mitchell knelt before her, his head bent to feel the first fluttering movements of their child. I think it's a boy, he said, grinning up at her. Oh, and how can you possibly know that? Abigail asked, amused. Just a feeling. A strong little cowboy like his father. Abigail ran her fingers through his hair. Maybe a strong little girl like her mother. Either way, Mitchell said, kissing her palm, this child will be loved beyond measure. As summer progressed, Mitchell began working on a cradle. It was made from the same golden oak as the rocking chair, with intricate carvings of leaves and flowers along the sides. Abigail watched him work in the evenings, his big hands surprisingly delicate as they shaped the wood. It's beautiful, she told him as he applied the final coat of polish. Perfect? Not quite perfect yet, he said mysteriously. The next day he brought home a length of soft blue fabric, which Abigail sewed into a mattress and bedding for the cradle. When it was finished, Mitchell placed it beside their bed in the same spot where the rocking chair had once stood, where Abigail's first cradle had been. Now it's perfect, he said, putting his arm around her waist as they stood admiring it. In late September, just as the leaves were beginning to turn, Abigail went into labor. The midwife came from town, and Mitchell paced anxiously outside the bedroom door, praying fervently for the safety of his wife and child. After many hours, the cry of a newborn pierced the air, followed by the midwife's cheerful announcement. A healthy baby boy, Mr. Vaughn, and your wife is doing just fine. Mitchell rushed into the room to find Abigail propped up on pillows, tired but radiant, cradling a small bundle in her arms. She looked up as he entered, her smile as bright as the morning sun. Come meet your son, she said. Mitchell approached the bed with reverent steps, peering down at the red, wrinkled face of his child. The baby's eyes were closed, his tiny fists balled up against his chest. He's perfect, Mitchell whispered, overcome with emotion. What shall we name him? I was thinking Thomas Mitchell Vaughn, Abigail said. After his father and his grandfather, if that's all right with you. Mitchell nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. He sat carefully on the edge of the bed, one arm around Abigail, the other hand gently touching his son's downy head. Later, after the midwife had gone and baby Thomas was sleeping peacefully in his new cradle, Mitchell and Abigail lay side by side in their bed, watching the rise and fall of their son's chest by the light of a single candle. I never thought I could be this happy again, Abigail murmured, her head on Mitchell's shoulder. When I made you that rocking chair, Mitchell said, I hoped it might bring you some comfort. I never imagined it would lead to all this. Abigail turned her face up to his. You saved me, you know. Not just from grief, but from a life half-lived. We saved each other, Mitchell corrected gently, and now we have a whole new life to build together. As if on cue, baby Thomas stirred in his cradle, making small, snuffling sounds. Mitchell rose to lift him, cradling him with the natural ease that had surprised them both. He brought the baby back to bed, placing him carefully in Abigail's arms before sliding in beside them. In the soft glow of the candlelight, the three of them, mother, father, son, formed a tableau of perfect contentment. Outside, the Wyoming wind whistled through the trees, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote called to its mate. But inside the small cabin, all was warmth and love, and the quiet miracle of a family made whole again. Abigail looked from her husband's face to her son's, and then to the empty rocking chair beside the cradle. It stood as a testament to how far they had come from the depths of grief to the heights of joy, from solitary pain to shared blessings. The chair that had once been a place to hold her sorrow was now simply a piece of their home, a reminder of the day a kind cowboy had understood exactly what she needed, even before she knew herself. "I love you," she whispered to Mitchell, who had fallen asleep with his arm protectively around both her and the baby. As Thomas drifted back to sleep in her arms, Abigail closed her eyes, grateful beyond words for the second chance at happiness she had been given. The empty cradle of her past had given way to the full cradle of her present, and the future stretched before them, bright with promise and possibility.